The big mess was my thing. Something like such. Birth. Loss of mercy. Candidate. Thing. Refer to me.
To do it all. I don't know why it's doing that. Stupid fucking goddamn computer. There. Hello everyone on the YouTubes. How are you doing today? I hope all of you are well. It has been a long day for me. It's been a long day for me. If you didn't watch my day ruining video, don't start now. I released a video this morning that I kind of was spawned by a live stream the other day that I could not obsessively stop thinking about. And I ended up having to write and put together a video inside of 16 hours, which for a 24-minute video, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It ruined my day. So let's not have a day ruined instead, and let's actually move over to something that's more interesting. Our friend Klossowski. How's that sound to everyone? Everyone up for some Klossowski? All right, look at it. See, do you hear that fucking excitement? Do you hear that excitement? I hear that excitement. I hear that excitement. We are reading Klossowski's Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle, is translated by Daniel Smith, who is a fantastic translator, and it has been a treat so far. We have been making our way through the beginning of chapter 1. We read through the introduction and the beginning of chapter 1. This is a very light reading. I'm very glad we're doing it. I'm so glad we're doing it. I need a light reading in my life. I need a light reading in my life. I need a light reading in my life. And this is definitely that. AO has been a lot more directly related to things happening, which I just am continually getting tired of. So, Klossowski is a different beast. We've been making our way through as they've talked about Nietzsche, who has in his space started to deal with the idea of where morality, problems, culture, these things come from, how the group and the handling of the group or the model of things is coming to be. Not a ton has actually been said yet. We're only a couple pages in, to be perfectly frank. So I don't have a ton to add there at this point, but that's for the most part kind of where we're at, which is really kind of nice as far as I'm concerned. With that, I think we're just going to go ahead and keep reading from where we left off. If you have questions, if you want me to stop at any point, don't hesitate to speak out if you're here in the chat. If I seem to space out for a moment or two, be aware that's because I probably am. I am. Because I did not really sleep last night. The video went up and I was at the premiere. I finished editing it 20 minutes before that. Fell asleep right afterwards. Woke up again an hour and a half later. So I'm sure it's not going to compromise my ability to do any of this. But we'll see. We are at I Had Us at the bottom of page 7. One day. Anyone have us in a different spot? You're free to let me know quickly. Quickly would be the answer. All right, fair enough. Off we run. Off we run. Wait. Is that where I had us? No. Here. Sorry. Bottom of page 8. God damn. I even have it marked. It's been one of those days. To explore the foundation of Western culture, and especially bourgeois culture, under the pretext of going deeper into it and making it bearable, always amounts to legitimating it in human terms. But any possible legitimation was undermined in advance, once Nietzsche denounced a society founded on the ideological disavowal of the external constraints it necessarily exerts. The ideological disavowal of constraints is expressed through the concept of culture, and thus through a false interpretation of culture in a concept. The fact that modern society has merely formed a concept of culture is the proof of the disappearance of a lived culture. This is a thing that it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people to get through with Nietzsche. And again, this is not just Klossowski, Deleuze, there are a whole bunch of writers go through this. And it's, I went through this a little bit, and when I talk about, for example, the idea of Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? The very act of asking what is a woman is itself proof of the disappearance of the lived experience of what that thing means. That you have to ask means that it doesn't mean that. Once upon a time, you didn't ask that because you just knew. Everyone just knew and everyone shared. They had that shared cultural lived experience. The breakdown of this, the shift of meaning, as capital does towards this, is the thing that Nietzsche's talking about here. And Klossowski's talking about through Nietzsche here, obviously. He opens up here, to explore the foundational Western culture, especially bourgeois culture, under the pretext of going deeper, amounts to legitimating it in human terms. You see this a lot in liberal sort of humanist cultural critique, especially in the modern day. They try to find a deeper meaning within bourgeois culture, what it means or how it operates. And ultimately just that is apologia for the just the simplest way. It's something that ultimately in the end kind of supports the conditions that create bourgeois culture in itself. And with this, Nietzsche, who absolutely went squarely at any of this, Nietzsche's entire genealogical method, the genealogy of morals, beyond good and evil, where he went in with this, his genealogical method fundamentally breaks this down. It talks about and opens up this already compromised way that culture works and is legitimated itself. He talks about, and it's specifically the thing here that is sort of the important line, is the focus on external constraints. This is what Nietzsche talks about specifically, and Klossowski's drawing from. This is Sod, who Klossowski, Sod My Neighbor, Deleuze also, Coldness and Cruelty. We have a reading of, is our reading of that still going, Ben? I'm going to say yes. We have a reading of that too. They take a lot.
Reading of what?
Coldness and Cruelty.
Yeah. We're still going. Yeah. We're just starting chapter 10. We're just starting chapter 10.
And it's a what? There we go. Sundays. There we go. Because Sod is the big deal here. That they're sort of pulling with the idea of how institutions operate, and ultimately that this coercive way society sort of works becomes masked through ideological operations. This is the thing they're playing with. So for Nietzsche, a lot of this comes through the way necessity operates, and that there is necessary suffering that's transformed into voluntary submission. And of course, all that's done through resentment. That's right. It always comes back to fucking resentment. Always comes back to resentment. And so with that, Klossowski says the ideological disavowal of constraints is expressed through the concept of culture, and thus a false interpretation of culture in a concept. This is an almost poetically brilliant, simple statement. This is incredibly tight. This is so tight. There is, I can't believe disavowals, of course, coming up after the video today. Disavowal is such an important concept in psychoanalysis, but I would say just in general, with a lot of things that we sort of have to deal with Klossowski, Nietzsche, and Deleuze, it's massive. Because again, it's not just denial. That's one thing. But the simultaneous acknowledgement and rejection of a thing is really important here. So when we're talking about ideological disavowal of external constraints, that disavowal is simultaneously accepting and denying together at once. And so with this, we have this weird thing, this distinction between culture and a concept of culture. And what he's talking about here is this idea of the interpretation, the conceptualization of culture is the distortion. People who have and experience culture don't talk about their culture. There isn't a meta conversation. That's Klossowski's point through Nietzsche. That's Nietzsche's point too. The thing that you're doing is actually having a meta conversation about the thing, but not doing the thing. Thereby, you've actually completely fucked up the thing. The way it's not far from the way you can't, quantum theory of electrons. You can't measure both spin and position and speed and all this other shit at the same time. You pick one, basically. By measuring it, you've changed the outcome. By talking about the concept of culture, it's actually proof that there is no longer a lived culture. We are now in a position of talking about it, of endless goddamn talking about it. My video on Peacemaker, I talk about this, and it's specifically through Klossowski and this book, actually. But it's the idea that we live in a time now where the talking about culture is actually the lived culture. And it's a hard thing to sort of wrap your head around and be able to step into. This is not far from Jameson's postmodernism, or Lyotard's take on it. The way that we live is different. It isn't that there is an authentic culture to get back to. Our authentic culture is an authentic cultural commentary, which is a fucking hell of a statement. And that sentence, the disavowal of constraints is expressed through the concept of culture and thus through a false interpretation of culture in a concept. The fact that modern society has merely formed a concept of culture is the proof of the disappearance of lived culture itself. This is the fundamental thing we're going to be going through. This is a huge amount of the book. This is that meta conversation. This is the bullshit. The way that this functions is the genealogical revelation. This is the fact that is proof that this is a Nietzsche's thing. Klossowski's very much just taking from Nietzsche throughout this, like the style of this, which I really like. But it is the disappearance of lived culture. This is not over time decay. This is the disappearance. So, following so far. Everyone following so far, generally speaking? No? Yes? Maybe a little bit, more or less?
Could you elaborate more on disavowal, right? And what is its relation to kind of the people who kind of saying like Western culture is superior than other cultures, right? Like, so, you see that on the right.
So it's
this sentiment on the right.
Yeah. So one second, let me turn my headphones down a little bit. So when we're talking about Western culture, but he's not really talking about Western, he's being very particular here. Western bourgeois culture. What people tend to do when they're making critique of it, and this is when people are making critiques of, let's say, go watch a video on how people are critiquing Squid Games, right? So Squid Game is a anti-capitalist show that people are critiquing because it isn't anti-capitalist enough, or it's within capitalism, or whatever. It doesn't matter. They're making commentary on it in this particular way that is critiquing bourgeois culture under the pretext of going deeper into it, making it bearable. Always amounts, though, to legitimating bourgeois culture. Because what's happening is the commentary that is happening, that is, oh, I'm going to talk about this thing that's going on within bourgeois culture. The challenge, and it's the disavowal that's happening, is that the creation of this concept of culture, the talking about it, that you can talk about it, that there is a culture to talk about, that is a concept. There isn't. What is culture? What does culture mean? But we've got this thing now we talk about, which is this big, large, glomming on fucking symbol of stuff. It's a concept, but it's not the lived culture. You're not critiquing anything. And we know this because a lived culture, people don't talk about. They just are doing the thing. The culture is the acts and production of people. It's the resources that people use within social and network relations inside of varying sizes of groups that creates commonality and communication, resonances between them. You talking about it is literally not the culture, but also the thing you're talking about isn't the culture. So we know this, though. Like, again, we know this. There's a weird awareness of, I am making commentary on commentary on commentary, which is what like a video on Squid Games is. Squid Games is a commentary on other things, which are themselves commentary on other things, which are them like there's a fucking like human centipede style commentary group that's always shitting in each other's mouths going around. And they're talking about it as though, oh, but that's culture. What the fuck are you talking about?
It's become like what Deleuze said in different repetition when he talked about Kant, like nor fictitious, nor referring to object, nor known, right? Concept, right? Mm-hmm. This kind of like thing that has representation, but it's not known. Like, it's not fiction, right? It's not kind of hypothesis, but at the same time, it's still a concept. It's still a kind of representative of something, right? Representative of, yeah.
Well, and this is through Sod and through all these works. These again, Nietzsche does it. Others, Klossowski does it through Sod. Deleuze does too. There's a reality of hey, I'm critiquing and having this conversation in this way that we're having this freedom and voluntary participation of society. But we are very aware that there is this bullshit underlying legitimating force that is there, that's enforcing these things. I know that society is coercive, but nevertheless, it is what represents human flourishing. I know bourgeois culture is ultimately oppressive, but nevertheless, it's the classic form of disavowal. And again, this is not just normal repression. This is not denial. This is not any of that, but this is allowing uncomfortable truths remaining as part of your conscious systems, right? And so we have liberalized education, bourgeois education. It's part of Western bourgeois culture, is this liberal academic structure, right? That, and I'm going to say some things. I know we're going to laugh, but I'm kind of going over the last 50 years. I'm not talking about like in the last 6 months. Boy, academia and college really helps cultivate people. Sorry, it's people have said this. I grew up in a time in the 90s where this is what people said. College cultivates your potential. It helps you find your stuff. But we also know, and we knew at the time, that this is ultimately training people for incorporations within the productive capacities of industry. The disavowal that's there happens through this humanistic rhetoric, this humanistic critique. And this is what Klossowski is talking about through Nietzsche. Nietzsche denounced a society founded on this ideological disavowal of external constraints it necessarily exerts. But the culture we live in is one of brutal constraints. Right now, anyone who would say otherwise right now in America is out of their fucking mind. There's a reality that anyone who says something negative about our president might actually be disappeared, and not in a weird, creepy way of like, oh, really, Brooks? Like, no, like literally they could just be arrested, or they could be sued into the ground and have their lives completely destroyed. This freedom, this is not new. It's more obvious now, but it's the same thing that's been happening my entire life. There's no difference, but it was disavowed until it became almost too much in our face. This is how this operates, and Nietzsche absolutely believes any society that's founded on this ideological disavowal of external constraints, of external force, that thing itself is bullshit. And so that thing that's happening, as Klossowski writes, the ideological disavowal of constraints is expressed through the concept of culture. When we talk about bourgeois culture, we're talking about actually a very complex system of restraints and other things, but we don't talk about it as such. We're talking about the powered class, the empowered class who has control and power and is able to crush goddamn people underneath their fucking feet if they decide they want to. Oh.
Afnan tipped $4.20. Really
Very
loved
kind.
the last videos you uploaded. Heart suit emoji, sparkles emoji. You have a fantastic personality.
You're very kind, Afnan. You're very kind. Thank you. The bourgeois crush people under their foot. No one's confused about this. Like, this has been known. Like, Marx didn't like invent the idea of the bourgeois crushing people. Like, they knew. It's not far from like saying how, oh, fuck, in America in the 1860s, we learned slavery was bad. It's like, no, fucking, we knew this shit was fucked up. Like, we've known all of these things are fucked up. We knew, and we've known, that America was built on the backs of chattel slaves, on the backs of immigrants and human trafficking of extraordinary proportions that it's very difficult to even conceptualize. But what I want to do is I want to critique American culture. And it's like, oh, dude, that modern society has merely formed a concept of culture is the proof of the disappearance of a lived culture. Beautiful words from Klossowski, I think. I do. I really, really like it. I think it's good. But that's probably how I would phrase where the disavowal literally is and how. If that makes sense. Because that's the thing that Nietzsche's talking about. That's the disavowal at the cornerstone of his emancipatory project, and I think Klossowski's as well. Does that make sense? Did I follow through on that okay? Hey, I've got 9,999 subscribers. I'm taking a screenshot of that. It's like when your fucking odometer in your car spins over. You children probably don't know what that feels like, but it's kind of cool. So I'm just going to make a note of this in the fucking Discord because I feel like it. So we'll see who the lucky 10,000th is. Rollover is a thing. Not everyone gets it. What is a woman sort of like ordinal gaze? Yeah, it's very similar. Organelle, so implicit in this is that once culture becomes a concept for debate, it's not about what culture is, but what it might be. It's about the concept of culture and the challenge, and we're going to get into the problems with that idea. The challenge there is that it's the concept of culture, not culture. Because, how do I put it? Like, if I were to go to like an uncontacted tribe and be like, hey, your culture is really interesting. they would be very confused. Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What's a culture? And then I'd explain to them, oh, here are all the things you do that are fucking super weird or outside of the norm for me. And they're the things I see as different than my world and how I see things. And they'd go, oh, and then they would grow a concept of culture that would make them understand themselves in a way that is outside of their actual lived experience. We're seeing the beginning of, just as like a cheat sheet, the beginning of the phantasm for him, the fantasy phantasm for Klossowski. Big deal, big setup. That's kind of the thing. We're going to get into it. Don't worry. The next couple paragraphs go a little bit deeper into organelles. We'll get there. If we don't, in the like 2 or 3 paragraphs, make sure you tell me that I'm wrong and that we need to go over it. But to continue reading. The conception of the Greek state formed by the young Nietzsche became a phantasm that was all the more obsessive in that it was incompatible with the concept of culture. Quote from Nietzsche, that slavery belongs... Oh, Olive, I'm going to mute you. Mute yourself real quick for me, Olive. You're coming through, or I'm at least hearing myself. Thank you. Or I guess leave. I didn't mean to scare you off. To quote Nietzsche, that slavery belongs to the essence of a culture is a truth that leaves no doubt as to the absolute value of existence. For the Promethean instigator of culture, it is the vulture that gnaws at the liver. Oh, God, I'm fucking so good. Okay. Nietzsche had a lot of phases, we'll say. I don't know if your parents were like mine. It's just a phase. He'll get over it. Nietzsche had a few of these, and there's a few that we got kind of happy. He was very much early on aristocratic and kind of fucked up. His early stuff, like the Greek state that they're talking about here, is an essay he wrote specifically, which talked about slavery being necessary for cultural achievement in the sort of Tyler Durden Fight Club-esque Space Monkeys sacrifices necessary for society to move forward. Almost exactly. A little bit different, but that kind of thing. And for Nietzsche, this was a huge deal. In his early stuff, he very much came away from this. Very much came away from this later on. But it's important. Early Nietzsche had this. Young Nietzsche. You got to remember, young Nietzsche is early 20s. Or younger. Like he was very prolific and kind of brilliant early on and was kind of important. So we have a really odd version of Nietzsche. But early Nietzsche had this the Greek state and this idea. And as he wrote, and that's the quotes from this, that slavery belongs to the essence of culture, blah, blah, blah. So here is where Klossowski, though, brings up the phantasm, the phantasma. PH in English, F in French, everything's very confusing here. But this is important because this is, when he says this, we're not talking about the fantasy or anything. This is not some illusion. This is a structured, unconscious scenario. That's what a phantasm is, a structured, unconscious scenario, a system of an image of thought almost that works in a particular way. It's systemic. It ties into other stuff. The phantasm is I wouldn't say a materiality, but it's very much a Deleuze-centric concept. If you notice, he uses and writes essays on it throughout Logic of Sense, and then actually brings these things back as various terms in Anti-Oedipus, Thousand Plateaus, and later. But here, the whole point for this, when he's talking about Nietzsche, is that this obsession is intensified because what's happening is that he sees this humanistic notion of culture as universal human development and immediately is like finds it incompatible with everything. The break for him is that the concept of the Greek state formed by the young Nietzsche became a phantasm that was all the more obsessive in that it was incompatible with the concept of culture. And the quotation here from the Greek state is Nietzsche's early insight.
Here I go anti-anything. Ho ho.
Gengeros super chatted $4.99.
One sec, super chat.
Bought new shirt with "Be an ally, arm your trans friends" with a trans flag and AK-47 on it. Can wait to wear.
Yes. Gingros bought a shirt. For those in Discord who can't hear it, Gingros bought a shirt that said, "Be an ally, arm your trans friends." It's got a trans flag with an AK-47 on it. It is we live in interesting times, don't we? I just think back like 20 years to my friends in like the queer rights movement, pre-gay marriage, and the types of people we were and how we thought about things. And the idea of us arming ourselves was anathema to the entire project. And it's just weird to think in time how life does what it does. Just very strange. Life is fascinating. The quote, to go back to the quote, the Greek state here, as he's quoting it, is kind of about this. Klossowski's pulling from Nietzsche's like early insight into this way that culture's actions necessarily has a sacrificial structure to it. He says, his words, that slavery belongs to the essence of a culture is a truth that leaves no doubt as to the absolute value of existence. For the Promethean instigator of culture, it is the vulture that gnaws at the liver. The vulture is bad conscience, slave morality, all of that comes from this violent foundation of culture, but it's an honest recognition of it. That's the big deal here. The absolute value of existence is the actual thing being denied, as we kind of have this weird ideological disavowal of external constraints, which is the big deal here for Klossowski and Nietzsche. This is a small paragraph for a reason. We're going to keep going real quick, and then organelles, make sure I do come back to your question if we don't cover it. A lived culture, say back to it, according to Nietzsche, can never have a gregarious foundation. It is the fact of the particular case, and thus, from the viewpoint of the bourgeois concept of culture, a monstrosity. Though himself dependent on this concept, Nietzsche would nonetheless destroy it. Now, the concept of culture is like the concept of freedom. Both tend to cover over a specifically modern fact, the fact of experimentation. We will see later how experimentation restores the servitude that the concept of culture conjures away. Nietzsche summarized this in the following manner. There are forces present at the heart of an individual, struggles and externizable constraints. Which of them will be made into masters and which into slaves? Experimentation always involves an inventor, an experimental object, failures, successes, victims, and sacrificers. Not sacrifices, sacrificers. We're literally going through the process here of Nietzsche, and Klossowski's very open about Nietzsche's early views, and actually we're going through the process Nietzsche went through to then undo his own views, which is pretty fucking awesome as far as I'm concerned to be able to have that kind of reading. We're also getting into some really interesting Klossowski, I don't want to say memes, but motifs would be a thing. For Klossowski, experimentation's a huge fucking deal, and you'll see it throughout all of his works. Big deal, big deal, big deal. But also Foucault, like this comes from his talks with Foucault and other things. So, and his influence of Bataille, who's a significant influence. But to continue, this thing, a lived culture, according to Nietzsche, can never have a gregarious foundation. It's the fact of a particular case, culture, monstrosity. Wait, a monstrosity. Where do I have that? That's in the other version. Fascinating. Yeah, it's the next bit. And thus, from the viewpoint of the bourgeois concept, a monstrosity. I skipped the fucking sentence. God. Let's say again. It is the fact of the particular case, and thus, from the viewpoint of the bourgeois concept of culture, a monstrosity. Gregarious is how Deleuze and others, and Klossowski, have translated to French and then to English, the way Nietzsche talks about herd mentality. When we talk about herd mentality, it's actually a fairly common term, I think, for us nowadays. It's the at large, what people are doing, the herd mentality, the thing that produces homogeneity within a group, right? So a lived culture can never have a foundation in that herd mentality. It is the fact of the particular case. Particular case is a lived person, singular, actually, unrepeatable moments that you have, not generalizable principles that can be stretched across a group. It's singular, unrepeatable events. That's the particular case. And thus, from the viewpoint of the bourgeois concept of culture, a monstrosity. It's a deviation from the natural herd mentality norm. It's the deviation from the normative. It is a monstrosity because it is a particular case. The specifics, the thing, it can never become universal by definition. That's the thrust of this one. That is the idea of lived culture. A lived culture is a monstrosity because it cannot be averaged out to the homogeneity of the entire group. Hey, did I get to 10K? Who is it? Oh, I broke it by a few. Let's see who these people are. Oh, I can't tell. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like it's Nasty Motion. Nasty Motion, who has a video about Factorio 3. Has their video on their channel, and their banner says hello. I broke 10,000. We broke 10,000, guys. Yeah, that's pretty fucking crazy, actually. We got a few at once, so fascinating. What a fucking time, man. What a weird fucking time. Sorry. Now just remembering the video I posted today. Back to this.
Brooks.
Yes.
When he said like it's a fact of particular case, thus for the viewpoint of Nietzsche. I remember Nietzsche saying that there is no Deleuze repeated, and Nietzsche and Deleuze kind of taking that there is no matter of fact, right? There's nothing called matter of fact, only interpretation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only that's what quoted from Deleuze, and I think that it's I don't know, but what is the monstrosity of bourgeois, or the bourgeois concept? Is the disavowal in itself, or the kind of the general milieu, right?
So it's so specifically, and they're using fact differently here. The fact of a particular case is speaking of the singularity of it, a singular moment, element, and Deleuze uses these two. It's again, you have to really be careful about not conflating when they're talking about slightly different things, especially in the translation. But the fact of a particular case, the event of a particular case, the contingent fact of a particular thing is it. It is that thing. And that is the lived culture. It is the fact of a particular case. A lived culture is the lived experience of a particular person at a particular moment at a particular time. And thus, from the viewpoint of the bourgeois concept, which is gregarious necessarily and normative, it is a monstrosity. The particular case is a monstrosity. It is a singular symptom. We hate this. We hate this. And this is the big deal for Nietzsche and them as well, because when we talk about freedom or society and how liberal humanistic categories mask this power relation behind everything, which they do it through this ideological modus, that this setup puts us in a position of all this is the culture. We're commenting on the bourgeois. We're commenting on these symbols, but the symbols are the large-scale homogeneity. They're not the lived experience of power relations that any person experiences at any time. Foucault would talk about this in his biopolitics, that it's not so much a society, but how the pressures are felt by that person. Deleuze and Guattari, for them, it's not the society at large. Not really. It's about how desire is repressed or repressing itself through social machines. This, again, these things are anti-normative. It's very much about that one thing, the lived culture, which necessarily is, the opposite or anathema to this broader thing that he's doing. And again, as he says, though himself dependent on this concept, Nietzsche would destroy it. The way that this conceptual thinking operates for Nietzsche is he would actually use concepts to destroy concepts. That was his sort of deal. And as he would start going through this, the concept of culture is like the concept of freedom. Both tend to cover over a specifically modern fact, the fact of experimentation. And this is the thing that ultimately kind of both culture and freedom, as we're talking about, or bourgeois culture for certain, but any of these critics or people just simply get rid of. In Living Currency, he talks about one of the things that we forget a lot about capitalism. I really like how he phrases it and talks about it. When we create a factory, we tend to think about a factory standing up and the cost of a factory running or the building of it. We don't really realize that there is a lot of failure that goes into making a factory. Not only do you have to kind of readjust your plans based on the space that you can get or the building you can get or the materials you can get, and so everything's constantly changing, but there's a lot of waste that is produced through that. This is experimentation, even though we don't call it that. When we put machines in there, we start doing the process of tooling. There is a lot of failed attempts, broken attempts, product that can't be sold, product that can't be used, product that simply breaks or burns or destroys itself. These are experimentation. This is all of this stuff, and all of it is ultimately the characterization for him of modernity. This is the laboratory of force manipulation that is experimentation is disavowed entirely. And that's what he's getting at here. That Nietzsche is, he's reading Nietzsche, and I can't help but do it now. But the thing that's happening with all of it, both the concept of culture is like the concept of freedom, both cover over experimentation. Now, experimentation restores servitude that the concept of culture conjures away. Nietzsche summarized this in this way, and we'll go through this bit by bit. There are forces present at the heart of an individual. This is core Nietzsche. Everything's forces, and you are the sort of coalition of them, you might say, the crushing of them together. There are struggles and externalizable constraints. Which of these forces will be made masters and which slaves? This is Deleuze's book on Nietzsche is basically this, and runs straight into his concept of desire machines and all of that with Guattari later. Because experimentation, as he's talking about it and as he's running through this is the whole deal for him. All of this. It always involves an inventor, an experimental object, failures, successes, victims, and sacrificers. This is all of these things, which are part of what we do not realize is happening and we disavow as part of everything in our social order. For every success that we see or we talk about, for everything, there is experimentation that happened to build that. And that is the people you see on Instagram, me here talking to you, you here commenting on fucking YouTube, Sunday writing about some awful book, that person who wrote that awful book, the people who printed that awful book. All of these things exist in this moment because of the experimentation that took place just prior. And that experimentation, socially and internally, always involves the inventor, the experimental object, failures, successes, victims, and sacrificers. All of this goes into what is that singular moment of lived culture. And this is the way that experimental cruelty is covered over. This is the way that we disavow and we build a critique of things as they are, or the concept of how things are, by disavowing everything else.
I mean that's kind of my feeling when a lot of liberal politicians kind of experiment. I feel like a lab rat in my own country, in a weird way, right?
It really opens a
Like-
lot of political commentary for me too. It's a really, when you start talking about that, and then even more, start looking at them and realizing they were experiments and they're the successful one, I guess we could say in quotes, or they're not yet and we don't know. There's a really weird way to start noticing this. But in it, there are victims, sacrificers and sacrificees are built into this. Failures, successes, the inventor and the experimental object. All of this stuff is disavowed when we talk about culture conceptually. We've eliminated in that way that we've disavowed all the externalizable constraints, but also the way that individual forces that do exist, the struggles of them, some become masters, some become slaves, even internally. Like, this is, I read this as, I cannot help but, sorry, I'm just going to be tying it back how I read this. For me, this is, the schiz for Anti-Oedipus. This is the inclusive or exclusive disjunction in the way the syntheses operate. Experimentation is always there. There's always an inventor, an experimental object, failures, successes, victims, and sacrificers. And when we have that miraculating moment at the end of the three syntheses, where we have something, we claim the rest and we flatten it. We do that because we disavow the process and we create the singular. I think Klossowski says it better, honestly, which is maybe blasphemy right now, but I think he says it incredibly well. And it's a powerful statement as I read it.
I mean, the French revolutionaries did the populism or people, even the famous question by Hegel, what is meant by the word people, right? In his famous kind of...
Well, didn't he have the line...
Constitution in the right? What's meant by Constitution, right?
Well, didn't he also have the line, and it's one I think that also hits here, something, I'm not quoting it right probably, but you don't notice changes happening until it's happened, something along those lines, which is the same. We retroactively flatten and create representation around these things. We create the concept of culture is only at the end of the process. We've not realized all of the things that are part of the process in creating it, but not just that, but also creating us seeing it, which is even worse. It's even worse.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Hi, Brooke.
Hello.
Hi. I have a question. Have you read for Lacerdo?
I have not. I am aware of Lacerdo, but I have not read Lacerdo.
Yeah, it's just when you were talking about the slavery things, he has, I think it's a really remarkable book, my opinion, on how democracy and stuff were actually only a result of the slavery, and the way he puts it is beautiful on that. But yeah, that's a longer discussion. Anyway, there's something that I wanted to ask you.
Please.
In terms of how Nietzsche viewed culture between the early and late Nietzsche. Which one do you prefer?
Later. So early Nietzsche, and it's what Klossowski goes through here, is His early stuff is basically as he's starting to understand, the Greek state formed by young Nietzsche became a phantasm, all the more obsessive in that it was incompatible with the concept of culture. As he started to understand this dichotomy that he was creating for himself, which is basically, like, not spoiler alerts for Nietzsche, but he literally writes about, holy fuck, I was fucked up because I had all these dichotomies, and here is the thing, and he begins using concepts to break down concepts. This early stuff is just filled with it. And I don't think his early stuff is very good. It's once you've read Nietzsche, the early stuff, it helps you understand how he got there, but it doesn't build out anything more interesting. For me, everyone has very different takes on Nietzsche. You do you. But for me, the later stuff is where he starts breaking down and going, oh, fuck, here are these dichotomies. Here's the problems. Oh, here's this. If we do this, do you notice that if this is the fact, then what about this? And it's like, this becomes proof of that. And his genealogical method just starts breaking this down. And the genealogical method is, again, central here, because the whole point for everything that, and we're going to be continuing, obviously, but the whole point now is that Nietzsche would go on to destroy it, and he would begin to create concepts of culture like the concept of freedom. And he would begin seeing how they create disavowal, how they manipulate forces, rather than culture being a thing that he's critiquing, which is where he started, if that makes sense. Again, this is how I read him. I can't get away from being very heavily influenced by Klossowski at this point, so I may be repeating stuff that is said in here, but so be it, as far as I'm concerned, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, I do think the early Nietzsche is a little bit not celebrated enough. Although, because I do know there are many things that are very wrong, like the way he his view on art and tragedy and his early work on the Greeks. I think
I'm gonna say I agree with you. So there are parts of his early work I shouldn't have said. You're right. Yeah, you got me. I shouldn't have said it so broadly. I agree. I think he has some really beautiful early stuff. He does have some, but this stuff, the stuff about how to change society or things like that, where he's being polemic, and I think that early stuff is a little bit questionable, I would say, actually.
Now I agree with that, except one book, his book on Schopenhauer. Because to me, that book just explains the concept of Bildung and culture in a very fascinating way that his later work weren't, except if you exclude genealogy of morals. Then, because in that one, what Nietzsche is trying to draw, that is that to him, in that book especially, when he's talking about Schopenhauer, there is no doubt that the death of culture and the shrinking of Bildung, it's lying in the it lies in the this search of usefulness by transforming, and that's why he talks about Schopenhauer, by the transforming from knowledge or looking for knowledge to science. So by changing sensual and vital aspects of knowledge into which were based, of course, based on the Greeks, so it's always based on taste and pleasure, but then they were seeking transcendental values towards technical science, towards goals of using tools, abundance of reservoirs and stuff. So this part, you don't find it in the early Nietzsche as clear as it's in Schopenhauer, don't you think? Especially that on Schopenhauer, the way he puts culture and the dynamic between the process of making a subject and culture, it's he puts it in a very aesthetic way of drawing, in some sense. I don't know if you got the point.
No, well, I mean, let me say that it's been a bit since I've read Schopenhauer, the Educator. The idea and the critique of education that is central to that is how I sort of read against it. And so I'm trying to, it's been a while. For me, the thing that I took away was, again, it's post this Greek state shit by a couple of years. So you're starting to get towards later Nietzsche. Like, again, Nietzsche didn't live 100 years. So like early to late Nietzsche isn't like 50 fucking years. It's not like Deleuze who wrote early on and then had like 40 years of fucking writing. But for me,
where are we considering the break-off between early and later Nietzsche for this?
That's
discussion?
A great question. That's a great question.
Genealogy or gay science?
I think there's a lot of conversations to be had. I still would say we're still in early Nietzsche. We're still in early Nietzsche overall. Like, I'm not going to say like we're crossing a line by doing, but like when was Human Ulti Human? What was that?
1876.
Yeah. So like 2 more years. Like it's, again, I would say that that's at least more, if that's not it, that's cuspy, because we're only talking another couple years until we hit genealogy and until there's no question. Like if we're talking like 1872 to 1878 is like the early to late Nietzsche. That's not a huge window as far as philosophy and thought goes. So, I would say it's definitely, we're still in early, but I think you can see, when I read this, I see a gradient of him recognizing and working with things. The work he did with Schopenhauer, how I read it, and again, it's more singular. I probably didn't do a very good reading of it. But for me, he sees in Schopenhauer a way to be outside of culture. That's his thing, is like the independence of thought that can be had by proper philosophers. And Schopenhauer's like this cool dude who did it right. I'm very much oversimplifying, I know. But that's how I sort of read that. And he kind of was playing with it in really weird ways. Again, I need to go back and read it. That's, you know what? I'm just going to say I need to go back and read it, and I'm too tired. I shouldn't fucking talk. God damn it. Now I'm doubting my own thoughts on this book. God damn it.
No, you're very much accurate. The thing is that Nietzsche received a lot of critique on it, especially by followers of Nietzsche. Like if you read
well, this is where, is, even during his time, this is the shit that made him like fuck off out of academia. Like he was not, again, he had 6 years where he kind of went from early to late Nietzsche. I'm going to look up dates of books. I need to figure this out. When was early Nietzsche end? When do people have what is everyone saying? When does early Nietzsche end? What is everyone's bets?
I mean, to me, the very clear line is after Schopenhauer, after the book on Schopenhauer, is a new phase of Nietzsche. It's a new way of thinking. Because until that point, it can be said that you can still draw many lines between the way he was thinking.
Oh, yeah. Well, Well, this is, and this is how the thing that this resonates with Klossowski, the thing we're reading, what Klossowski's writing here that resonates with me is that early Nietzsche is basically marked by cultural prophecy. That, like, I don't want to say like Jordan Peterson, but I'm gonna, because it's that kind of way of talking about here's where we're going, here's what things, like, it's a very different type of writing. I'm not saying bad, and I'm not saying bad like Peterson, but it didn't have the what I would, or I think people would come to call a more materialist or genealogical analysis and a method that he built because of I think Schopenhauer for sure set that up, and it really shifted everything. His disillusionment that happened in like 75, oh God, my brain, 75, 76, that led to Human Ulti Human. For me, that's the, like, where you start seeing him fully reject the metaphysics of Schopenhauer, but kind of begin playing with the direction Schope gave him. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Now that's the thing. This is the exact point, which is because of this shift, usually followers of Nietzsche starts critiquing his view on early Schopenhauer. And even if you read for them, Deleuze or Derrida, when they come to this, they'll be like, oh, this was the early Nietzsche, and oh, then he changed his ideas,
Right.
and it wasn't as great. When, to me, and if we're talking about culture and building, then this is actually the prime Nietzsche that should be read. This is where, to me, this is where Nietzsche grasps on the exact depth of culture and the education system, and how the process is not only one way, it's more of like a dynamic change within.
Well, you're going to fucking love this book then. Jesus Christ, because that's Klossowski's argument, is basically Nietzsche is unaware that he's writing his best work, that he only becomes aware of the method for analyzing later, almost, which is kind of a weird way to phrase it, but that's kind of what Klossowski's doing. Is like, Nietzsche was brilliant, he nailed a whole bunch of stuff, but you need to do it through a lens of later Nietzsche to understand how he was doing it. Because in the same way that if we talk about the concept of culture necessarily means there is no lived culture, it's the death of culture. In the same way, early Nietzsche, who's just doing the thing, and later when he's talking about the thing, it's the same setup. He's putting a critique in a place that you can apply earlier to himself. I'm going to continue to the next bit, Afnan, and you're going to tell me if this is hitting on this stuff. Because it's really, I think this is going to be really interesting. I want to hear your take on this, because throughout this book, and you'll see this, personal correspondence and private notes that have only been recently published in English. Thank you very much, all you people who do all of that. He's taken from a bunch of this. And so he's taking from a bunch of his personal correspondence to make some points. And so it's like, early Nietzsche is 1972? No, we're going earlier. In 1871, well before he had passed through all the phases of his thought and discovered his own way of conceiving the meaning of successive Western cultures, Nietzsche had seen in The Report of the Burning of the Tuileries during the Commune an untenable argument for a traditional culture. He had written to Gersdorff. What a fucking name. He wrote this in 21st of June, 1871. Gersdorff. If we could discuss this together, we would agree that precisely in that phenomenon does our modern life, we would agree that precisely in that phenomenon does our modern life, actually the whole of old Christian Europe and its state, but above all, the Romanic civilization, which is now everywhere predominant, show the enormous degree to which our world has been damaged, and that, with all our past behind us, we all bear the guilt that such a terror could come to light, so that we must make sure we do not ascribe to those unfortunates alone the crime of a combat against culture. I know what that means, the combat against culture, emphasis added by Klossowski. When I heard of the fires in Paris, I felt for several days annihilated, and was overwhelmed by fears and doubts. The entire scholarly, scientific, philosophical, and artistic existence seemed an absurdity. If a single day could wipe out the most glorious works of art, even whole periods of art, I clung with earnest conviction to the metaphysical value of art, which cannot exist for the sake of impoverished people, but which has higher missions to fulfill. But even when the pain was at its worst, I could not cast a stone against those blasphemers, who were to me only carriers of the general guilt, which gives much food for thought. Just to continue this paragraph. The young professor of philology of the 1870s was still reacting and expressing himself like an erudite bourgeois, yet the cynicism of a phrase like the one in which he announces that art cannot exist for the sake of impoverished people points to his own critical use of irony, and he expresses his own condemnation in the beginning and ending lines. If art cannot exist for impoverished people, then the latter assume the guilt of its destruction. But they are simply manifestations of our own culture, our universal culture, which dissimulates our own iniquity in the guise of culture. To assume the crime of the combat against culture was an underlying theme of the young Nietzsche's still Hellenizing Thinlung. But this assumption was merely the obverse of a theme that would become more explicit in the years to come. To assume culture's crime against existing misery, which will finally put culture itself in question, a criminal culture. I find Klossowski's work here extraordinary. This is like I'm not sure it's exactly what you're doing after him, but he is taking early Nietzsche and he is absolutely running a thread straight through it in a really extraordinary way, in the way he's also making commentary on what Nietzsche's doing through his own genealogical method, which is so fucking crazy. It's crazy to me. It's like wild shit.
Yeah. I've read Klossowski about my language, but now that's the thing. I think we share, maybe perhaps me and him and you, a one point of view in terms of specifically one thing, which is this phase of Nietzsche, which is, I think, during the same time where he started talking about forgetting and the idea of moving forward, memory and all of those stuff, also time. It's in the same year, if I'm not mistaken, when he wrote on Schopenhauer, it's the same year that he wrote Use and Abuse of the History. And in both of them, that's the peak when we're speaking of culture, where Nietzsche really makes a good point on it. Now, perhaps a better were explained later in Genealogy of Morals. That's definite, because it's a better way of writing and stuff. This is exactly what I meant. That this 2 years or 3 years of Nietzsche, 74 to 77, perhaps, are the best if you're looking for the idea of culture, because in that he talks about Faust, Goethe. He talks about Schopenhauer, and he goes back and he changes some of his ideas on the Greeks. So within those is where all was developed, I think. And I'm glad that you share this point, because postmodernist philosophers or late 20th century, they usually don't see this early work, especially on Schopenhauer, as something that led to.
Well, it's tough. It's because you kind of have to take it. Deleuze in Logic of Sense has his first writing on the body without organs, and it's on its own, it's really not good. It's just really not good. But in context of his work before, seminars during, and obviously work after on the concept, which ends up becoming central to his and Guattari's work, suddenly you can actually really put more weight behind a handful of things. It builds out the structure of the concept in an extraordinary way. To me, this is what this type of reading, again, Nietzsche's own genealogical method being applied to Nietzsche, getting his genealogical method is kind of hilarious in an almost satirical way, definitely an ironic way. But the fun part for me is that all of this is kind of, and a spoiler alert, all of this is coming around to then turning Nietzsche into an anti-culture machine, effectively, where he builds doctrine of the vicious circle, the eternal return, as being anti-cultural itself. And that shift is going to become really fascinating. And I mean, he says it right here. I'll continue in 2 seconds. I want to give everyone else a chance to talk, because I will not stop fucking talking if no one stops me. Because I just won't. But I want to give everyone a chance to also talk. Because we got 50 people listening to me on fucking YouTube, on the YouTube right now. So just saying, fucking, it's a weird feeling. Yay for Klossowski. Anyone here in the Discord?
I have a question out of the context.
Why
It's
not?
about the last video you had.
Oh,
It's just one simple
can-
question.
All right, do it quick.
Have you read The Stones on God? The Stones God. The Stones
no.
God by...
No, I have not.
Okay. It's just a novel. It's a very beautiful. I think you will like it if you read it. I thought you read it because many of the points you said, it's a novel. Where linking. Anyway, thank you.
If you would, type out the author and title in chat, and I'd love to read something. I always love finding things that like I'm accidentally referencing that I don't know about. It's always fun.
I'm enjoying the reading, but I don't know much to add.
Excellent. I'm glad. It gets better. Is like the best fucking... I love this book so fucking much. I really do. So, this last thing, by the way, is a big thrust, and I want... if I'm putting a pen, I'm gonna just laying heavy weight on a handful of words. There's a reason for that. I believe it'll help you continue to have the right threads as we make our way through. Keep in mind the idea of a criminal culture. Criminal culture is a big deal. This is, again, reading Nietzsche through Sod. So if you haven't joined our Madness reading, our Sod reading that Ben leads on Sundays, Ben? Sundays.
Yeah, we talk about Sod, but really it's more about Mazak.
It is about both.
Actually, it's about Lacan.
It is also about Lacan. It is about Lacan. But the reading of Nietzsche and Sod together for Klossowski is bringing towards this idea, the idea of, for Nietzsche, the criminal culture. It's a big fucking deal, actually, the idea of this. And so it was, for Nietzsche, it's huge, flatly. It's not so much, again, and it's what he says in this letter and how he sets it out. And again, it's why I like that he's using this like personal correspondence. Because he opens like talking about these, if you don't know, like these bastards who burned everything down, these fucking criminals. But wait a second. Yeah, actually, you know what? It's not so much culture like has criminal effects, but that criminality is the structure of culture. That's the last bit here. I could not cast a stone against the blasphemers, who were to me only carriers of a general guilt, which gives much food for thought. And that's it. To assume culture's crime against existing misery, which will finally put culture itself in question, a criminal culture. And then to continue reading.
Sorry.
Yes.
No. Continue reading, and after that, continue reading. Pardon.
At first sight, this seems to be a totally aberrant vision. The communards never considered attacking art in the name of social misery. The way Nietzsche poses the problem here after reading an erroneous news item reveals exactly what he is himself admitting: a feeling of bourgeois guilt. But it is on the basis of this feeling that he poses the true problem. Am I guilty of enjoying the culture of which the impoverished class is deprived, or not? Again, the meta reading of old Nietzsche is the way to do it. Don't read Nietzsche for Nietzsche in that way. I will just say again, if you're going to read old Nietzsche, it's worth the meta reading, and it's actually really interesting, like the way that Klossowski's doing it. Or just read this book, and that'll do fine. What he means by our guilt, a guilt which, according to him, was ascribed to the arsonist gesture, the arsonist burned very famous works of art, is to have allowed Christian and post-Christian morality to promote confusion, namely the illusion and hypocrisy of a culture that would have no social inequalities, whereas it is inequality alone which makes culture possible. Inequality and struggle between different groups of affects. This is a jam. This is so fucking good. The problem is not cultural privilege per se, but instead the framework that conceals the unequal structure that culture necessitates. It's, again, which is going to be Nietzsche's critique of culture. He fucking quoted from later stuff earlier, but this setup, this thing that he's playing with is this weird religious egalitarianism, this humanism, this secular humanism and universality of things that has been part of bourgeois culture for 100 plus 200 years. The way that these things work is necessarily they take different groups of affects, drives, what you might call passions or impulses. Again, pre-personal, I would say. This becomes instead cultural political terms. So you have a culture that emerges from the agonistic struggle, to just use Nietzschean terms there, instead of the harmonious development of them. This is it's a different take than Marx. This is not just saying, oh, this is class struggle is the basis of everything. No. It's not just the struggle. The struggle's fine. The struggle's good. In fact, struggle is kind of the jam. He's going to end up talking about at some point this thing called the will to power, which is the will to overcome. Struggle is itself not bad. It's not so much struggle. It's how the struggle operates, the way that they function, and the lie of this, again, secular humanism or religious egalitarianism. This is what he's talking about, the illusion and hypocrisy of a culture that would have no social inequalities, whereas it is inequality alone that makes culture possible. Inequality and struggle. That's the jams that are doing this and that are setting this up. Right?
So when he talked in Beyond Good and Evil about the socialists, he mean this kind of like I have to reread Beyond
100%,
Good and Evil, but
100%. It's secular humanist.
Yeah,
100%.
Do you remember the section?
Yeah.
Right. Do you remember the section? Yeah, about the socialists. I think there's something here that must be reevaluated or.
Oh, don't worry.
Genealogy to Nietzsche.
Don't worry. Genealogy of Morals is central to this book. So don't worry. We're going to get there. Like literally, I think we're going to get to that section actually. So 99% sure. It may be living. I believe it's in this actually. So we'll get there. I think fairly soon actually. To continue though, because I want to keep burning through this because I think generally, if anyone's not getting this, please do let me know. But I think generally, again, Klossowski's very crisp. The translation's phenomenal. I think it's generally coming across. So to continue. At the end of his short career, Nietzsche would side with the criminal as an irretrievable force, virtually superior to an order of things that excludes it. His refusal to cast a stone at the unfortunate communards, the people who burned shit and rose up, at the carriers of the general guilt, pointed both to an instinctive, though still unavowed, solidarity, and to a problem unsolvable for the young Nietzsche in the terms thus posed: culture, social misery, crime, combat against culture. And here we go back to some Nietzsche. It was only very late that I was able to discover what, strictly speaking, I was absolutely lacking, namely justice. What is justice? Is it possible? And if it were not possible, how would life be bearable? This is what I was constantly asking myself. And when I delved into myself, I was deeply distressed to find nothing but passions everywhere, perspectives from a determinate angle, the thoughtlessness, the irreflection of everything that is deprived of the prior conditions of justice in advance. And where then was reflection? Reflection from a vast perspicuity. The only thing I could attribute to myself was courage and a certain durability, the fruit of a long domination of myself. Oh, God, good Nietzsche is good Nietzsche. Just fucking good Nietzsche is just fucking really good Nietzsche. And they have, just real quick, and then we'll go back, because it's Klossowski's note. As long as culture implies slavery and is the product of unavowed slavery, the problem of guilt persists. And I think that is a very good way to put a cap on that for him, as far as I'm concerned, for that quote. And here's Nietzsche now talking about himself. Fucking, I love this, because this is late Nietzsche. When I say late Nietzsche, I mean like, I think this is Nachlass, which is like 1888, like way late Nietzsche. Well, certainly not early Nietzsche, I suppose. But this is the thing he later was doing, as he sort of was, again, reflecting on himself. He says himself, it is only very late. He's aware, but it's also after, I think, most of his works that you've probably heard of or that I've cared about. There's a huge pressure building up in him. If you know the story of how things go after 88, 89 is the snap. And the thing he's talking about here, justice, that he absolutely went over and over in his early works, without a doubt. But it's not moral political justice. This is not justice within the justice system or any of that. He's not talking about here. He's talking about like an ontological version of it. The idea of having a legitimate relationship to existence itself, given the fact that all knowledge is necessarily perspectival. Like, this completely fucked him up. This is him recapitulating the early crises, and then also a thing that he, I believe, actually did deal with and tarry with, but was still not aware of. So there's this process in Nietzsche, if you read all the way through him. And Afnan, I'd be curious if you'd agree with this. But if you read him, there's kind of this, there's Nietzsche, and then there's like meta-Nietzsche commenting on himself as he builds new stuff. And then there's meta-Nietzsche commenting. But he's always like finding ways to then reconceptualize himself and move back a little bit and then keep moving forward. There's, again, it's almost like, I don't know, a genealogical method that he fucking talks about. But still, I think that's a fair way to put it.
In the quote, right?
Yeah.
I could attribute to myself was the courage and a certain durability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Durability in what way? Like the fruit of long domination of myself, right? There is some kind of political kind of thing, because Nietzsche discusses in the Human All Too Human about Machiavelli, right? And the politics of durability, right?
Mm-hmm.
I forgot the specific quote, but like he discusses kind of like the idea of the politics of durability, and he was hearing with the concept a little bit, right?
So
I think, yeah.
Just, it's worth, because again, we're talking about German translated to French, translated to English. And I do think, again, Daniel Smith is kind of a master of this. I'm not going to knock that, but it is not easy. We're talking about a very unique type of courage and durability in this work. The courage he's talking about is not like Courage the Cowardly Dog, or like, I have courage, I'm able to endure. No, it's more he looking into the void, understanding there is groundlessness, and still affirming existence. The positive nihilism that I ascribe to him, I think, is what he's talking about here. The courage of having no ground, yet still affirming his own existence. That is courage. I believe the original text for him uses the word mute. I'm not German. I don't even pretend. And for durability, English sucks for this. The original French has certain durée, which is a duration ability almost, which is not a word, I guess, because it's not. That's what it's about. It's not like durability, like it's durable plastic or durable leather. It's there is a temporality to endurance. It's not so much a durability of some eternal thing. And so together, the whole point he's making here is the only thing I could attribute to myself was the ability to have an affirmation of existence despite there being no ground, and to endure in time rather than sort of some eternal odd truth. The fruit of a long domination of myself, the longue domination de moi-même, is this self-cultivational thing that he's always been referencing, or definitely referenced in his later works, because for him it was that instead of returning to that foundation of justice. This is the counter to justice that he's bringing up here in this work. At least, again, this is as I read it, but the underlying thing that's happening here that is the big deal for Klossowski, Nietzsche's crisis of justice that he's talking about here is about the structural impossibility of justice within any culture, within a cultural formation of any sort, because it necessitates exclusion and domination. That's what culture is, exclusion and domination. It dominates the singular and it excludes the odd. It always has to. Culture is always normative and everyone is always excluded and dominated. It is part of the disavowal that is part of cultural existence. So when we have this unavowed, which is unacknowledged, is probably better. It's not disavowal, it's unavowed. The way he's talking about it now, when I, one sec. The product of unavowed slavery, the problem of guilt persists. The modern setup for all of this and the denial of the violent foundations make the guilt problem sharper, more acute, more instant, more now than in the frank aristocratic societies, classic American chattel slavery South. Slavery was not disavowed. It may have been discussed even openly and finally, and they were totally cool with it. Like, they were totally cool with it. They were like, hey, we got a bunch of slaves. Yeah, I have a bunch of slaves who do all my work for me. Yeah, me too. It's pretty great. They were just that thing. We don't do that anymore, but we still have that. We don't talk about exploitation of workers. People really don't like it's this unavowed slavery. And as long as in culture implies slavery and is the product of unavowed slavery, which is different than disavowed, the problem of guilt will persist. It is that persistence of guilt that prevents what Nietzsche is seeking and prevents that shift of how we can handle these things. It's a hell of a sentence to add to this. And it's Klossowski like putting a very fine point, I think, on what Nietzsche is aiming at through all of these works and as what he's continuing to go to, that the problem of guilt is going to persist because culture necessarily implies these things. It's built into it. Does that make sense? All right. Good to hear. So, then we go to the next. And it's Hegel. So, Afnan, I'm glad you're here. Glad you're here. Because this is fucking this. We'll say my Hegel is weak. That's my nice version of it. It's weak. Does living in culture mean that one wills slavery? What would happen to culture if slavery were suppressed? Would culture have to be extended to each and every person? Would we then have a culture of slaves? But this, it seems, is a false problem. Culture is the product of the slave, and having produced culture, he is now its conscious master. This is what Hegel demonstrated. Nietzsche is the incorrigible beneficiary of this culture, but for Nietzsche, the slave who has become a master of culture is nothing other than Christian morality. And because the latter will be prolonged in certain forms of communality, what in the fuck is this scan? First in the form of bourgeois culture, then in the socializing form of industrialization, Nietzsche, out of his own ignorance, will attack the Hegelian dialectic at its roots. In his analysis of the unhappy consciousness, Hegel distorts the initial desire, the will to power. The autonomous consciousness of the master despairs of ever having its autonomy recognized by another autonomous being, since it is necessarily constituted by a dependent consciousness, that of the slave. Poof.
Yeah, it's very good. That's very delicious. Delicious,
Good.
like delicious book. Like he's right. The unhappy consciousness is dependent. You know, it believes in the other, right? Leave me alone and let me believe like with the other people, right? Depending like the slave, right?
2 seconds.
Dollars
I'm
and
doing
20
that.
cents.
I'm
No, please. Love Hegel. He deserves some love. Smiley face emoji. Folded hands emoji.
Thank you very much, Afnan. And don't worry, we're giving love. We have Marcellus here who I will continue to let talk. He's not exactly anti-Hegel. I don't think you're anti-Hegel, are you, Marcellus?
It's very good to be anti-Hegelian. What are you talking about? Like it's very good, Brooks. Like it's very good to be an anti-Hegelian. Like you know, critiquing Hegel, the things that he is actually right in this sentence, right?
Right.
Pierre
Klossowski, yeah.
is actually right. Because at the end of, at the midst of the religious section, Hegel trying to save kind of like what the rest of Christianity is, like what left from the phenomenological aspect of Christianity, right? Mm-hmm. And the question to me, right, among all religions, right? Yep. Like why it's like the mode of like most kind of advanced, right? So
I don't tend to shit on Hegel. August, go for it. You jump it in.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask specifically culture here. He's talking about culture and not the discourse on culture. Like, because earlier we were talking about the culture as in the thing that's being then like the meta discussion of culture.
It is that.
Okay.
So let me be more specific. Culture is not lived culture. Like lived culture, we don't discuss.
It's so the category of culture.
Correct.
Okay.
Great. Like you don't talk about culture. If you've ascribed something to culture, you've kind of eliminated from being part of culture because culture is the lived experience. The normative culture, which is the homogenized thing that everyone sort of is dealing with, that is just lived. And when it's a very interesting back and forth, but we are talking about, I think, that extracted thing rather than just how people live their lives.
Great. Okay.
We generally are anti-Hegelian here, but not in the way that we're like Hegel sucks. I don't think Hegel sucks, actually. I just disagree.
You should read Hegel, but you should read Hegel in a way that I spent like 4 years reading Hegel, right? And there's things that like critiquing Hegel is not like, oh, Hegel sucks or Hegel. No, that's a counter assumption, right? That's what he wrote actually in his book, right? That is a counter, an expecting system to be, accepted or counter. This is a counter assumption, as Hegel said. But like, critiquing Hegel within the system of Hegel, right? Which actually working through Hegel and kind of like the things that like Hegel failed to kind of conceptualize.
As I like to say, he's one of like the main bosses of philosophy that you have to kind of actually deal with in one capacity or another before you can move on. Spinoza's up there, and Hegel even agreed with that. He said, you're either someone who believes in you're either a Spinozist or not a philosopher, which is a hell of a statement of an endorsement from Hegel, who did not do that a lot. But I would say Hegel's someone who you also have to tarry with, to use his own term, because he and Kant and a bunch of other people created concepts and solutions for things that if you don't have something that deals with certain things, you don't have a fucking philosophy as far as I'm concerned, because they deal with a lot of really important shit that I do think we can critique and move beyond. But if you can't do that, you're not doing philosophy, is my sort of running comment on Hegel. It's like saying you're super into psychoanalysis, but you're not really going to read Lacan because you don't like him. It's like, really? That's not going to get you anywhere, buddy. He kind of solved a bunch of shit, and so did Guattari, but he did it by learning Lacan. So you got to kind of deal with it. It's the way it works. But with this, when we open up, does living in culture mean one? Well, does living in culture mean one wills slavery? This is all of this. This is the dilemma, again, playing with the thing we just read from Nietzsche. The whole thing is here. If culture requires slaves, then either participation in said culture implies complicity with slavery, or universal culture is self-contradictory, a culture of slaves, that doesn't make sense, sort of on its face, like as a thing. This is cultural democracy, by the way. A culture of slaves is it's cultural democracy. He's talking about cultural democracy. That's the jam here. It's a jam here. So as he's going through, this is false. It's a false problem. Culture is the product of the slave. If you haven't read Nietzsche, Genealogy of Morals, that is basically the book. I don't want to say that's like chapter 6. It's like, no, this is basically what Nietzsche gets at, is the idea of culture, how people begin creating these cultures out of self-sabotage and resentment and the powerlessness that one feels and experiences, begin creating and folding on itself. And culture is the product of the slave. Having produced culture, the slave is its conscious master. This is how slave morality, but also the culture of, he's talking about Christianity here. But a lot of other cultures as well. This is the thing. And this is he says is what Hegel demonstrated. I think that's fair. This is, again, I ain't read a lot of Hegel, but thank you to a YouTube guy who's got a chalkboard. Phenomenology of spirit is the thing that I've been able to make it through. And this is the master-slave dialectic. That's what Hegel demonstrated. That's just clean cut. But, Nietzsche is the incorrigible beneficiary of this culture. Nietzsche, we just read through the notes. He's not only started by being aware that he was the beneficiary of this culture and felt... Nope, I got another super chat.
Anafnan tipped $4.20. I haven't until now got to see your position on Hegel. I find it lovely that you are not aggressive on his philosophy. I actually did my MSc on his critique, but I still love him.
I grew to like Hegel. For those who didn't hear, Afnan was saying that it's glad to hear that someone isn't just saying fuck Hegel, which sometimes I do, but I mostly do it as a joke. But I came into like complex philosophy psychoanalysis through Zizek. You cannot do that without having, at least in some way, I don't want to even say romantic, but it's certain rose-colored glasses for the work Hegel did in some capacity, because it's the corpus of work is so fucking huge. So it's a fucking after effect. Nietzsche is a young Hegelian. Fuck you, Marcellus.
Yeah, I was early. He's a young Hegelian.
He's a young Hegelian e-girl.
He is. He was.
He's a Hegelian e-girl.
He was a young Hegelian e-girl. Yeah, e-girl. But like he's kind of shape-shifted.
Fuck.
He's kind of discovered. But anyway, that, I'm joking. But like, the idea of God is dead is actually existed in the phenomenology. Hegel said that, by the way, in the phenomenology.
Well, God is dead is not the interesting part. Well, that's not the interesting line from Nietzsche.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He was basically like, God is dead. Exactly. Good for you. Like, it was like that's his joke. It's like, good for you, buddy.
Yeah, that's like a lot of Nietzscheans and a lot of people who read Nietzsche, like especially the atheists. I'm sorry, like I'm being like hyperbolic. Sorry for that, but like a lot of them saying like God is dead. You know, he's the concept of God. No, Hegel like did that. Like he said like God is dead. You know, and he attributed to the unhappy consciousness, right? That the secular consciousness. And that's what is relevant to Nietzsche. And that's what I am interested in reading. Why I'm reading Klossowski, right? God damn it, his name is very hard.
It is a complicated name, especially for languages that I know don't have some of those combinations of words or sounds. It's going to be a fun one. But to continue, just real quick, because it's the thing that's happening here is Klossowski's starting. It's like, yeah, this is what Hegel demonstrated. This is not. As I just said, sort of the interesting thing is not the thing that Nietzsche is saying that's sort of just continuing Hegel. Because what's happening is, for Nietzsche, the slave who has become the master of culture is nothing other than Christian morality. That's it. That's the jam. The way that Nietzsche can't escape dependence on the cultural formation he critiques. This is the jam of the whole fucking thing. Is it the Christian morality, right? Klossowski's adding that, obviously, to this, because what Hegel, I mean, again, interpretation, but dialectical progress under Hegel is diagnosed as resentiment's victory by Nietzsche, which is a hell of a fucking morph. And that shift, the cultural mastery that the slave gains, isn't liberatory. It's actually the triumph of the reactive forces that necessarily negate the entire way that life can have a high form, or the aristocratic form, or the master mentality, or whatever. It's the reactive forces negating life that he's hitting on here. And that's really the jam. The latter will be prolonged in certain forms of communality, first in the form of bourgeois culture, then the socializing form of industrialization. Nietzsche, out of his own ignorance, will attack the Hegelian dialectic at its roots. And this is Klossowski doing a crazy tracing job. Again, I wonder how many others have done this shit, but running straight through all of this, it's like, okay, so we've got Christian morality, which necessarily creates bourgeois culture, which creates industrial socialism, which is the successive form of slave morality's cultural domination and the mastery of the culture by the slave. Fucking wild as like an analysis. And this is what Klossowski's doing and seeing that Nietzsche's doing. And that's the ending here that apparently, as Marcellus said, was delicious. Delicious. In his analysis of the unhappy consciousness, Hegel distorts the initial desire, which is the will to power. The autonomous consciousness of the master despairs of ever having its autonomy recognized by another autonomous being, since it is necessarily constituted by a dependent consciousness, that of the slave. This is all the way through returning it again. Hegel had this unhappy consciousness, right? But it's a misrepresentation of what Nietzsche would call the will to power. Unhappy consciousness is the will to power in Nietzsche, which is Not a thing I had linked in any other capacity before. It's a hell of a way to do it. And basically, if you're going to do this, this means you're reading Nietzsche and Will to Power into Hegelian desire, which is completely fucking weird and awesome.
Yeah, you have to the people who want to read the phenomenology, right? Hegel has this shape-shifting kind of arguments, right? Like this kind of, like, kind of dialectics, but like dialectics, not thesis, synthesis, like these kind of like dumb shit that we kind of watch on YouTube. But the unhappy consciousness or the secular consciousness is kind of what Hegel and you can read it in the religious section, right? In the section on religion in the phenomenology, which attributed to the death of God, right? So at that time, when Hegel kind of talking about that, it's not the definitive kind of like section, right? Because Hegel will shift his dialectic to Christianity, right? So he will shift, like he will dwell on it in a section, in specific section, in the religion section, and he will transform, not making definitive kind of, or sublimating this kind of like idea of, or this kind of concept of the unhappy consciousness, and moving toward Christianity, right? Moving toward the dialectics and moving toward kind of like the setup, the phenomenological setup of Christianity as such, right? And you can find that in the late writings in the religion section, in the phenomenology, right? So yeah.
Yes.
I have one point.
Woohoo!
I couldn't stay away. I can't. I'm not. It's not like I'm trying to defend Hegel or anything. Of course not.
I don't think you have to. I don't think they're necessarily attacking Hegel here, but go for it.
Yeah, but there is this point where especially if we're talking of oppression, state, power dynamics. You mentioned it, linking Nietzsche as well into Hegelian desire, because if there is this part that Hegel writes, which is political freedom means that the state or the city or the state is free, and religious freedom means that the religion is free.
Mm-hmm.
And consciousness freedom means that the conscious is free. That doesn't mean that I, referring to myself or someone, is free from them, or that he got rid of them and he's now free. And that's the whole point where Hegel's Christianity comes from. It's not coming from what Nietzsche and sees, or even on Kant, that they're trying to remake the Christian morality in the notion and sense of putting it on a mask and delivering it as modernity. Like, oh, this is a new morality, a new concept of human freedom or transcendental or whatever, either Kant or Hegel, because same critique could be said about both from a Nietzschean position. But I think this is where things get a little bit very more complex, because if you get the point where what I just said of quoting Hegel, and this actually he says it where he writes about the state, then what he's trying to say is that at the end, Christianity, morality, is what built, is in many senses built the consciousness or the way we think, as to him as Europeans, obviously, because at the end, now there are two sides if you want to critique Hegel. Like there is this where if you're, for example, decolonialist, and I actually did my MSCs on that, and it was on Hegel, critiquing Hegel as a decolonialist. But if you're getting from the pure philosophy of thinking on the consciousness, mind, culture, building, and those, then I think my position on Deleuze and Guattari's critique of Hegel is actually them critiquing Kugif. And they know that. They're
They do.
critiquing the understanding, exactly.
Yes.
They're not really critiquing Hegel.
Well, no, there's
The
a reason
problem is-
that the only times like he mentions Hegel is not even in a critical state, I think, in Difference and Repetition. He talks of the concepts around it, but I don't think he actually even says ever like, this is why Hegel sucks or anything like that. I think he's pretty clear about it, to be frank.
Yeah, that's really good because that you get that. Because many of Deleuze readers, they don't get that.
Well, most
Like,
Deleuze readers
yes.
don't read Deleuze, so...
Yeah, okay, that fair enough. But like a lot, you would find their position on Hegel, myself included, before like a long time ago, I hated Hegel. Like I hated him to the point that I wouldn't read him. It wasn't even in my wave.
I will say still, the one thing I will say is I hate his writing so much. I hate his writing so much. I hate his writing so much. I don't hate him. And it's not even his writing. It's how he's translated, I guess, or whatever. Cause obviously I don't read his original language, but Jesus Christ, what a fucking difficult read. And not difficult in like a really fun, interesting way, but in like reading Ulysses kind of way.
Okay, what do you think about Kant's translations?
I find them easier to read, but really, really, really dry.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, one last thing, which was
Go for it, because then I want to continue because you're setting me up for literally the next paragraph, and I want to do that.
Sorry. One
don't
more
be
thing,
sorry. It's great.
Yeah, one more thing, just one point, which is you mentioned death of God, or God is dead, whether from Nietzschean position or Hegelian position. The Hegelian position is very interesting because the Hegelian position is actually a paradox. It's the moment where the point of Hegel over here is that God, who's Jesus, when he was killed, he actually said, "Oh God, why did you leave me?" And if you understand this in the Hegelian sense, then many of the critiques around Hegel would just suddenly vanish. Because this point is exactly the Cosmos point of the Greeks. The Cosmos point of the Greeks is that the phenomena of something and the thing in itself are both real. It's not like the understanding of a trace or something. I wouldn't want to explain that. But this...
No, I agree. Just as a note, if you want to go deeper into that, if anyone's wanting to, I think Zizek's Puppet in the Dwarf does a really nice job of talking about that.
Yeah. I think to me...
It's specifically the way he does his commentary on that moment, because Zizek focuses a lot on that moment for Christ and Hegel.
What's interesting is to me that the best who explained Hegel, although a little bit, not a lot, but he said the clearest and broadest point is Badiou, which is very interesting.
Interesting.
Yes, which is very interesting because Badiou is in many sense anti-Hegelian.
Badiou is also not super fun to read. My opinion. My opinion. I will continue because
Go ahead.
But anyway, the critique here, though, that Klossowski is bringing up, where Nietzsche goes at Hegel, is specific. For Hegel's master-slave dialectic, to very much simplify, the master, the slave, obviously sort of reacts to the master. The master despairs of ever having its autonomy recognized by another autonomous being, since it necessarily is constituted by this dependent consciousness, that of the slave. But for Nietzsche, the next paragraph, in Nietzsche, there is no such need for reciprocity. This is his ignorance of this passage of the dialectic. On the contrary, his own idiosyncrasy, the sovereignty of an incommunicable emotion, the very idea of a consciousness for itself mediated by another consciousness remains foreign to Nietzsche. Which is, I really like how he's phrasing this, because it's not a thing that Nietzsche ever like drew out as like, here's where fuck Hegel, like not like that. It actually comes out of his own ignorance is the phrasing. Just to read, George Bataille in his book, it's a book on Nietzsche. Do you want to know what it's called? It's called On Nietzsche. So fucking great. But in Inner Experience, he talks about also on Nietzsche, he talks about this. Ann Bolt emphasized this ignorance in Genealogy of Morals. And you can read more. The relationship with Nietzsche and Hegel, see Gilles Deleuze, Nietzsche and philosophy, because Deleuze actually talks about this as well, that there was a poverty of knowledge or understanding of Hegel that actually led to some pretty ignorance can be good is the short jam of that. But to continue, because that's for Nietzsche, he was just like of course, the master mentality. The master doesn't despair of being recognized as master by someone who's dependent on them, by avowing the dependency. No, he's just the master, the aristocratic, which is what early Nietzsche would call it, the master mentality, the mentality of the Übermensch, the will to power, is simply freed. It doesn't have dependencies. It's almost entirely affirming. So to continue in this paragraph where he talks about this, sovereignty lies in the arbitrary manner by which one feels existence, which can be enriched through hostile resistance or increased through the emotion of an accomplice. The slave renounces his emotion and opposes it to labor, which diverts him from the emotion and justifies him against the arbitrary. To the degree that he does not renounce his idiosyncrasy, objectivation, the liberator of the emotion, is increased all the more in the one who does not seek an equivalent to his madness. The entire cultural, historical, and human world that the servile consciousness had begun to construct under the constraint of the autonomous consciousness, and through which the servile consciousness in turn becomes autonomous and triumphs over the consciousness of the master. In short, the world of culture. It was precisely against this world, against this culture of which he was both the product and the beneficiary, that Nietzsche rebelled. Nietzsche led this objectivation of the servile consciousness in the cultural world back to its source. And unless anyone wants me to stop, I want to just keep reading because it's a really solid continuous point. I'll give it a moment, just in case. Yet the reproduction of the world of affects through art has been possible only thanks to this historical and cultural world constructed by the servile consciousness. Is not art evidence of a consciousness that has become autonomous? But a new servitude now reigns over this fact, for the historical and human world has not managed to silence the affects. In order for this newly autonomous consciousness to triumph completely over the initial desire, represented by the idleness of the master, it was necessary for art to disappear. And we will see to what degree Nietzsche foresees its disappearance in the industrial plans of the future. And for the affects to be swallowed up entirely in the fabrication of exchangeable products. As long as these affects remain and presuppose idleness, do they necessarily require the servitude of a large number of people? But this is where the problem becomes displaced, for the affects are themselves enslaved by other affects, and not, at least initially, by the affects of other individuals, but by those within the same individual. And for Nietzsche, gregarious, means servile. Nietzsche will remain within this perspective of a guilty culture up to the time he puts consciousness and its categories in question in the name of the world of affects. Until then, there will always be carriers of the general guilt of a culture that masks the antinomies of bourgeois morality. In his Phantasm, Nietzsche saw the marvels of the Louvre in flames. What was important were not the marvels, but the emotions that lay at their origin. For these emotions make inequality prevail, and if inequality makes life unbearable, then courage and endurance are required to bear it. I really love this fucking book. I think you can see a lot of, for me, first time reading through this was a couple years ago, and it was this weird moment of like, oh, I was thinking about all of the contemporary discussion of the cathedral in France burning. Oh, Notre Dame burned. And is it that they cared about the Notre Dame? No, it's the emotions that lay at their origin. Those emotions, those are the things that make inequality prevail. I adore that sentiment. It rings extremely true to me. Just flatly extremely true to me. Please, Eeyore, welcome. Saw you on mute for a moment. Feel free. Oh, one sec. I got a super chat. 1 sec.
Afnan tipped $4.20 to Zizek It's Bwo Dummy. This was the best critique he received. Smiley face emoji.
I appreciate it. And, yeah. Good. Please, Eeyore, go for it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Just joining, having a listen.
Happy to have you. Any questions, any comments? Are you good?
I'm good so far. I was watching the video. Well, I started watching the video from the beginning, the first 20 minutes or so.
Oh.
But I'm a bit behind, so I have, because you're live for about an hour or two now. So
we are crossing the 2 hour mark.
Also I've recently read the book, so I hope I'll be able to follow along wherever you are in the book currently.
Well, we're very, very early. We're we're a wild 13 pages in. So.
Oh, okay. Big fan of the channel anyway.
Oh, glad to have you.
So, yeah, nice to meet you, Brooks. And if I have anything to add, I'll add something, but
please do. Everyone's welcome. Everyone's always welcome. As we like to say, please do join. Anyone's welcome to join. We have a very simple policy. If you turn out to be a psychotic, we have rules, very simple, but everyone's very welcome. And we love having lots of input and all that fun stuff, especially people who tend to come from like slightly different, but similar sort of positions, because it's really interesting to have all of the different takes, especially when we're talking about this. It's one of my favorite things about this specific read is, as we're going through, because I know August, who's here, is doing a Nietzsche reading, and like me, loves the Nietzsche. And as you're making your way through this, I've read other books on Nietzsche. I've read other philosophers' takes on Nietzsche, Deleuze, Bataille, explicitly. They're very good, and they changed how I viewed it. But this is like, I found this entire read to not only completely shift how I understand it, but to actually force me to really revisit and recapitulate why I believed anything I did in the first place, because it's such a unique turn. And we're not quite there yet. This is still that very early part where Klossowski's kind of running through, hey, this is how Nietzsche got to where he's going. This is the thrust of his arguments. Here's what he's doing. And when we start getting to like chapter 3, where the brunt of this becomes like Klossowski's reading becomes very much Klossowski's reading, I think that's the part I'm very excited for, because it's such a left turn from what anyone has ever said about the eternal return. it's going to be really fun. So, yep, welcome to have you, and can't wait. But
Yeah,
that is
thank
on,
you.
as Eeyore did let me know, that is the 2 hour and 15-minute mark, which is a lovely amount of time to be doing philosophy. But I did only get about 45 minutes of sleep last night, thanks to my horrifyingly depressing video, which ruined my day for the last 2 days. I will probably end up not streaming tonight. Don't be expecting that. But we will continue from here. 1 second. Yeah, let's see. Come on. Really? You're not going to work for me? Wonderful. That's my favorite thing to happen. 1 moment. I need to draw, and we're going to mark here. So it's going to be... We're just going to start from the page. We're going to start from up here. That'll work nice. Yeah, that'll work nice. Why is my pen not drawing? This is frustrating. Okay, that's very frustrating. It's because I have a fucking... Oh my god, this stupid fucking thing. Alright, now I select and then I choose. Draw. Fuck. I hate this stupid shit. Sorry, everyone. This will be... Reading 3 starts there. My lovely handwriting. I know everyone's very impressed with me. But with that, I'm going to do my outro and we'll get going. Thank everyone for joining. Thank you, new people, for saying hi. It's always, I know it's a lot. I trust me, I appreciate the weird awkwardness of speaking when no one knows who you are and you've not spoken. And it's like interrupting. Am I going to... Whoa. Yep, absolutely. Please join and talk. And I literally try to have awkward silences so people do. So I'd appreciate it anytime people talk. And certainly Afnan, deeply appreciated, and Gingaros also for supporting the channel. If you also want to support the channel, great way to do it. We got donation links in there. Obviously memberships, super chats, all that shit. Patreon's the best. If you can give a cup of coffee a month, head over to patreon.com/DGQC. Absolutely helps in making sure that this can be an ongoing thing. If everything's setting up, I'm actually looking at clearing $1,000 from all of this month, subtracting Discord Nitro and a few things from that, because we have a voice recording bot and a few other things that keep the server running. We're not quite clearing a grant, but hey, I'm getting there. Maybe at some point I'll be able to actually afford rent with this, and that'd be kind of amazing to be able to turn this full-time thing. And of course, the biggest way you can support us is just by joining us on Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. And with that, as always,
Patreon is better than links. The link
is also fine. Patreon is a lot of people like recurring monthly and just being done with it. I am Afnan. You're good, dude. You can stop. Also, by the way, at any point, you're not going to upset me. It's very appreciated. I feel very
supporting you to do it full time. So we have
yay. Happy to do it, and all of it helps. All of it helps push that, and it's all super appreciated. But with that, if you want your day ruined, do give a watch to my latest video. It happens to cover disavowal explicitly, which is not intentional. I didn't mean to tie it into today's reading because I didn't remember, because I was fucking tired. It was 16 hours of editing and writing and re-editing and
serendipitous though. The disavowal. It was my first encounter with well, obviously in Klossowski's reading I did encounter it, but it was never explored that deeply as in your latest video.
Yeah, well, it was an accident.
Have it bring up again now. Yeah, that's
it's
move anyway.
Serendipity is a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
The synchronicity, I think, is the term for it. But I'm always a fan of such things. If you can handle having your day ruined, please do watch it. I would, if you know people, and I mean this as someone who has an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, if you know someone who has children who maybe isn't as aware of how things work or what these worlds are like, do share it with them. I've sent it to a handful of friends, and I'm kind of horrified how people, not horrified at them, horrified at the situation we're in, where they're like, oh my God, I've been letting my 10-year-old play with these things. Like, oh, This is gross time. We're in a gross bad time, and it's sad and scares me. And I'm going to take today, I'm going to play some video games. I'm going to relax. I'm going to start writing up my next piece, which is on Squid Game, and a piece I translated from Klossowski called The Resemblance, which I'm really excited to sort of debut and play with. And it's not as depressing. Still depressing. I need more affirming, happy, stupid, dumb shit. So in the next day or two, I'll probably continue my ongoing review of Jordan Peterson's multi-part lecture series on Nietzsche, because it's fucking insane and it makes me smile and at least gives me a break. This is my version of a strip club, I guess would be. Jordan Peterson is my version of a stripper. It's fucking, that is going to get clipped, Brooks. This is why you don't talk when you're fucking tired, Brooks. Let me see, where am I sending anybody? Is there anything happening right now on any channel anywhere? Is there anything I should be sending anyone to right now? Feel free to start giving me ideas. I don't think there is anything, though, because YouTube is a wasteland for the most part. Let's see. Yep, everything's a wasteland. That sucks. No one's streaming. So with that,